Today we're going to break down a few different lighting setups we used on a recent commercial. For this project, we worked with Ben and Sam from Dream Louder, which is a local music production studio here in Toledo. We helped them create a video that showcases the wide range of music that they create for their clients. They came to us with a piece of music that combines several different genres and instruments, so we wanted to capture performances of each section of that song and then have the lighting change throughout that commercial based on the mood being portrayed by those. All of these performances were captured in their studio, which made kind of capturing everything from a time standpoint a lot less stressful, but it was a smaller space and all the walls were white, so that did present its own challenges, which we'll get into later in this video. When approaching the overall look we were going for in the commercial, we wanted the lighting to represent obviously those different genres of music, but also something that was still cohesive and still made sense all together. So let's jump right in and take a look at the first lighting setup here. With our first setup, we followed Sam as he played the piano. The first thing I noticed when we walked in and were setting up for angles was that large tinted window between the studio space and the editing station. It had a slight green hue to it, and the overcast sky was pushing enough light through those blinds to still affect the studio space. Instead of just blocking out that light, we pulled those blinds down to help diffuse it. For the artificial lighting, we placed a 1x2 bicolor flex mat on the opposite side of that piano. It was modified using a hard diffusion panel, which gave the light obviously a more diffused look than if we used the matte bare. And we also added a 45-degree angle grid on top of that to further control the light, especially when you're in such a small space like this. You want as much control of your light as possible. When positioning that panel, it was feathered away from the window so it wouldn't cause unwanted glare. We also dialed it to around 3000 Kelvin and set our camera up at around 4500 degrees Kelvin. This gave us a nice balance in between the cool colors coming in from that window and also the warm colors coming off of our flex mat. And just from a comparison standpoint, here is Ben sitting in for Sam as we were setting up the lighting, and you can see just that window light coming in, which again, like, was really nice for that background, but obviously wasn't really giving us much light on the performance, so we needed to add in that 1x2 light to obviously light up our performer there. As far as capturing the scene, we started with our wide shots first, then we moved in for those detail and close-up shots. One of the lighting adjustments we made while capturing the close-ups was tilting the flex mat over the piano a little bit more to give us more direct light on Sam's hands. When making minor adjustments like that, you want to try and have continuity between your lighting on your wides and close-ups. If they look drastically different between cuts, it can be jarring for the viewers, so always try to keep that in mind. This was a great way to start, so let's take a look at the next setup we did. For this next lighting setup, Ben was on an acoustic guitar. We wanted wider light coverage, so we used the 2x2 flex mat in a similar setup as the 1x2. We used the grid to give us light control and not completely flood the background behind him. The color temperature was also set to 3000 Kelvin. At some of the lower angles where there were lights in frame, they gave us some motivation that added a little more depth to the scene that otherwise would have just been kind of dark and boring up there, so it was nice to have those lights up above. Another light that we added to the scene was a 4-foot strip mat. This was dialed to about 5600K to simulate the daylight like we had in the previous setup. The strip mat was mounted to a metal pillar just using the magnets. We had that feathered forward, more facing the camera. That way it wasn't going to flood onto the background and cause, again, unwanted light spill. We wanted it to just hit Ben. So one of the nice things about the size of that strip is you don't have to worry about the light wrapping around your subject like a larger panel would have. The long vertical length of it allowed it to evenly hit Ben in that wide shot, as you can see from like up here on his head all the way down to his torso without it covering over the front or getting a spill on the background. So having that size was just a nice little kind of sliver of light that was able to hit him just on the side and still give us really kind of nice soft light on him. And without having the strip mat in the scene, the lighting would have looked maybe a little more flat if it was just that warm light in the scene. Having that color contrast in there always helps add a little more separation from that background. Another tip I always follow, especially when trying to get coverage I need for a scene, is capturing kind of some weirder and more extreme angles. This can always lead to more interesting B-roll coverage. I always try to incorporate the environment as much as possible in my B-roll. This can always add a little more depth, whether it's physically in screen like you can see here, but it also adds more depth emotionally as opposed to just getting a more clinical view of a scene. It's kind of nice to bring in the objects that are around it, and then you feel like you're a part of the environment. The last lighting setup is darker, and we introduced a new color to the palette. In this scene, Ben is introducing the synthesizer to the mix, and it was giving off kind of these 80s horror sci-fi vibes, and we kind of went with it by adding in that red. We used a 1x1 RGBW mat with a hard diffusion panel and a grid. We mounted that to a boom arm and just boom that right above Ben's head behind him, as you can see here. The color spilling down really complements the orange buttons and red buttons that you can see on the board, as well as the key light that's giving away that 3000 Kelvin as well. And that key light was a 1x2 mat, and it was mounted in a vertical position to give us a little more moody coverage on him as opposed to the wider coverage if we used it in a horizontal position. We were still getting a little bit of daylight being pushed in from that tinted window, and we were getting the blue, red, and then also that warmer color kind of mixed together in a few of these shots as well. So it was kind of cool to see all those colors complement each other and pull something together that was a little bit different than the previous setups. A running theme you'll probably notice throughout this whole video is light control. When mounting most of these lights, we had them with 40-degree angle grids on them, and that allowed us to make sure our light just wasn't spilling everywhere. We wanted to have control over it. There were white walls, which caused unwanted bounce of light, but also we just wanted to make sure our subjects were lit really well and stood out from the background. And being intentional with your lighting and knowing how to control it is essential for any shoot. One of the features I love about the flex panels that we used throughout this video is how light they were. We used them on the boom arms, and we were able to boom them above very quickly and easily, where a lot of other heavier panels, you just can't do that with, as quickly, and we had a very minimal crew. There was about 3 of us there on set. It really allowed our team to move quickly between setups and give us more time to experiment with different looks and get more angles and more coverage. Let us know in the comments below what are some of your favorite lighting control tips. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to get the latest notifications about our educational content. Thank you so much for watching.